Today's video will be a brand new what if. This will be what if Deku got the Ultramatrix. I've seen many video on YouTube about what if he got the Omnitrix, which I do agree, the original series top notch, way better than any of the seasons or anything that came after it. But here's kind of the thing. The Ultimate Alien kind of deserves some love. So this is what I'm going to do. A little bit of background for this. Deku, while we're going to skip a little bit later, around when he's 6 or 7, about 3 years before we originally meet him in the timeline. So about 3 years before he's running with All Might and the sludge villain. He would be out during the summer at a lake or something. His parents, or at least Inko, would have taken him out camping, and he'd be out late at night because he just couldn't sleep that night. And suddenly he'd see a meteor fall and land pretty close to where he was camping. And Deku is a pretty curious kid, so I figured he would go and try and investigate. And on his way there, he notices that some of the shrubbery is on fire. He just kind of walk around it, and there he would see a metal sphere that once he gets close to it, opens up to reveal the Ultramatrix. He'd sort of reach for it to see exactly what it is, and it would immediately latch onto his arm. He'd scream and be terrified, and he'd run back to his mom and dad to try and figure out what exactly happened. And Inko would be terrified, so would his dad, and they'd try and saw it off. But like in the original Ben 10, that really doesn't work. So they try to bang it off of a rock. Anything that they try to do to get it off just really doesn't work. And during all of this, Deku accidentally gets changed into one of his alien's form. He gets changed into Big Chill, which, for those of you who don't know, is basically an alien that's entire deal is pretty obvious in its name. It can breathe ice, it can go intangible, it can extend with it can withstand extreme temperatures such as very hot and very cold. It can eat metal, it does not need oxygen, and it can control ice. So he has this new form, he's freaking out, he's kind of standing back, and during this commotion, he accidentally freezes the lake. He gets super scared, so he bolts off flying in a direction, and pretty soon, the Ultramatrix times out and he falls, and luckily, since the Omnitrix, some people don't really know this, if the user is about to die, it'll immediately switch to an alien that it thinks will save him. And so, the one it turns to is a very classic one. It has to be Heat Blast. So it turns him to Heat Blast, and he immediately just sort of falls, and Heat Blast enhanced durability kind of allows this. Inko and his dad hop in the car and go to follow him. And when they find him, he just sort of surrounded by fire in this new fiery form, crying because he doesn't quite know what's going on. And so we'll cut to about a year later. He's kind of gotten a handle on this. It's kind of like Ben 10 original story. He doesn't always get the alien that he wants, and he does have a time limit on it, but he at least know what it is and what he can do with it. Deku, he doesn't consider this his quirk, but after he finds out that he doesn't have a quirk, he kind of figures this is the universe's way of making sure he can still become a hero. At this point, Bakugo's bullying has been going on for a while, but I think this time when he goes to protect the kid from Bakugo's bullying, he would turn to one of his aliens, and Bakugo and him would proceed to scrap, which, depending on which alien he chooses, will depend on exactly how well the fight goes. And just for fun of it, let's just bring back a rather obscure one called Snarrow. It's basically his mummy alien. With him being basically made of paper, he doesn't really stand a chance. So he ends up getting beat, and his confidence still goes down to normal Deku. Except not quite as much. It's kind of like 100% Deku is the way it was in the original. He's 80%. So he's a little bit more confident, but just not quite. And so let's cut to the day where everyone's like taking that career aptitude test. So the teacher is about to hand it out, but he ends up throwing it in the air because he says, why even bother with the test? You all are going to want to be heroes. And when Bakugo jumps up on his desk and insults the rest of the class, calling them extras, the teacher says, well, you actually might get in the UA. You're pretty strong, you're pretty smart, and all that. However, there is one student here also applied to UA, Deku. At this point, Bakugo kind of has a little bit of more respect, actually a lot more respect for Deku, since in this timeline, he actually thinks Deku has a quirk. But I'm not quite sure how to play into the fact that Deku has to have the Ultramatrix on his hand at all times. So I'm thinking it's a thing kind of like our good old birdie heady boy, to where it's kind of like a mutation along with like a different type of quirk. So I'm guessing that's kind of like how Bakugo would spin it in his mind. His quirk is to transform into different forms, which in his mind and in the rest of the classmates' mind is a pretty powerful quirk. And it's like, I don't know, like the amount I have on my list here is like 21 different transformations, which is the amount I'm limiting him to, which I think there's more than 21, but I'm not quite sure. I'm not going to count them all right now. But he says to Deku, I'll see you in the UA entrance exam. Just because you have a pretty strong quirk doesn't mean I'm going down easily. I'll take you out. So in this timeline, the whole blowing up the notebook thing doesn't quite work. But let's skip a little bit ahead to when the sludge villain attacks. During this, I think at this point, Big Chill's kind of become his main alien, considering that's the first one he transformed into. And I'll have to kind of admit this, Big Chill's kind of one of the more powerful aliens, and it's a direct counter to Bakugo, so I think he'd be working a lot on that, since in this timeline they kind of have a little bit of a rivalry going. So he just kind of slaps Omnitrix, turn the Big Chill, and freeze the sludge villain. So when All Might gets there, he'd be like, wow, I didn't even have to do anything, you just kind of did this. Hey, you look kind of funny, do you have a mutation quirk? Then Deku would turn back into his normal human state and be like, no, I have this little watch thing. It helps me turn to different forms and whatnot. All Might would be very impressed with this because he thinks it's a quirk also. And in this timeline, I don't think he'd get one for all, but I don't think Miria would get it either. I think he'd keep his eye on Deku to see how he sort of progresses. And so, with the sludge villain taken care of, All Might kind of picks up the statue and takes him off to the police station. So let's cut to the 1 month training period between the UA and everything else. I think he'd have the same idea as to go to the beach to sort of train with his aliens. He'd mainly focus on aliens such as Big Chill, since he's near the ocean. He'd also focus a little bit on Ripjaw, maybe some Accelerate, and some Wild Mutt, and also some Swamp Fire. He thinks those are his more powerful aliens, and those would be the ones that would help him most in the UA entrance exam. However, while he's there, he meets All Might training Mirio, and they would sort of help each other out, and All Might would also use this as an opportunity to decide which one he wants more to inherit One for All. See, in this timeline, I'm not making All Might like just gauging this off of base power alone. I think he sees a little something more in Deku, like maybe a little bit of himself. I think what Deku learns over the 1 month is how to go ultimate. With, I think, at least Big Chill, we're going to give him that much, so that way he's not overpowered, and that is kind of his main alien in this timeline. So I don't think he'd go Swamp Fire, Humongousaur like Ben 10. He's a more of a strategic mind than Ben is. Ben's main strategy is, if I'm strong enough, I can punch its lights out. And so let's sort of cut straight to the entrance exam. As he's walking, he still gets bumped by Bakugo and Saberrock. We still have that very cute moment right there. And so when he gets into the entrance exam, he starts taking the written part of this. I'd see him either using Brainstorm or Gray Matter in order to, get the very of top marks on his entrance exam, since it is very obvious that you can use quirks when taking the written test. Or at least I presume so, because if not, then those with super enhanced intelligence, they are just kind of barred automatically. But That's a part of it. What I really think he comes to shine is during the actual combat session. I think he'd rush in, choose upgrade, and just jump from like a 1-point robot to like each robot upwards, and just continuously smashing them and like upgrading the one that he's currently in, smashing more robots. And once the 0-point robot gets in, Ochako is still underneath it. But instead of smashing it, I think he'd take over it. However, I don't think he'd actually do anything with it, since Deku is pretty smart and he's under the preconceived notion that if he uses this thing, it's probably going to break some buildings and trap more people under rubble. I just think he'd shout out to some other people to get her out from underneath the rubble, and that right there would be it for the UA entrance exam arc. And so I think in this timeline, Deku would get way more points than he did in the original. I think he wouldn't get as many rescue points, but I think he'd more than make up for it with just, hero points and destroying robots and all that. So once Deku is sitting at home, he's eagerly awaiting his letter for acceptance in the UA. I think at this point, he'd know that he'd at least be offered into one of the other classes, not specifically a hero class, but he knows he's getting in the UA. So he is still very eagerly waiting, but the anxiety of him not being able to get into a class, I don't think it's going to be as prevalent as it would be in the original timeline. So he's waiting and waiting. A day goes by, a second, a third, then finally, the letter of acceptance, the little hollow disc, comes from UA. His mother rushes into the room, scrambling on her hands and knees, trying to get it to Izuku. Immediately runs over, grabs the letter. Inko asks if he wants to be alone for this. Deku says yes. He goes into his room, places this down, presses it. And as soon as he hears All Might congratulate him and say that he's gotten to the UA, he would be ecstatic. He'd shout, he'd jump up in the air, he'd scream in pleasure. And then he'd take the hollow disc, he'd run out, he'd play it for his mom, and they'd both celebrate. I think this is where we'll end it here. I am personally a big fan of both Ben 10 and My Hero Academia, and I just love this series and its particular ideas. I've not seen many people do Ultramatrix. I've seen like 1 or 2 people do the Omnitrix. But if you like this video, be sure to like it and tell me what I did good in the comments. If you didn't like it, leave a dislike and tell me what I did bad in the comments. I'm always looking to improve, always looking to go beyond. Plus Ultra. My god, that's so goddamn cheesy. But I will see y'all next time.